episode 107 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary, with Catherine
and Kristen, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, Kristen.
So our little chat this week is a question that I was actually asked the other day while I was buying books at the bookstore. The clerk, or, the person who worked there, sort of mentioned that they find that book talk is, ruining books.
Interesting.
So, I just want your thoughts. Do you think that, I guess, TikTok, but more specifically, the book side of TikTok, is ruining books?
So, I just think there's so much to this, because, I think that, not the ruining, but I think TikTok is hyping up books that makes them, puts them on a pedestal, and then you read them and you're like, why? It's not as good. We've had that happen with books before, that we've heard about on Instagram or TikTok, and then you've actually read them and been like, well, it's not that good. Or one that we liked, Fourth Wing, was really hyped up, and then a lot of people read it and were like, why is this so hyped up? Obviously everybody has their different tastes. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of talking about spiciness in books. People are like, oh my god, it was so spicy, and then you read it and you're like, but it's not really spicy. I find that happens a lot. So it's giving everyone a platform to review, but you almost need to have people that you trust. So in that way, I find, and then the other thing too is people just want to get popular on book talk and stuff, so they are just jumping on the bandwagon of whatever book people say is good. So it's hard to say. All that is hard to say.
Yeah. I sort of agree with you. I do feel though that book talk has sort of led to the rise of a lot of dark romance sort of stuff that wasn't, and I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it's sort of giving a platform to a lot of these underpublished or self-published or these books that maybe would not have gotten sort of the wouldn't have gotten the recognition without these reviews. I think Manacled is and that's just that's just fan fiction. That's not even, now apparently because it has gotten so popular, the author has decided to repurpose it as with original characters and publish it and release it. But Hunting and Haunting Aelin, I don't know the order they go in because I didn't read them, but a lot of these really dark books that could be considered problematic for some, not saying that they're wrong. If that's what you're into, that's what you're into. Read to your heart's content. But a lot of these books that are sort of darker in nature and sort of have I'm saying problematic themes.
Well, it's I've read Hunting Aelin. Haunting Aelin's the first one, and I've read half of Hunting, and then I was just once something resolved in that book, I was like, nah, you know what's gonna happen. So I kind of just laid it down. But they are problematic. And that's most dark romance is, but I still read it because I enjoy that. But they have lots of triggers and it's very obvious. So you kind of have to go in knowing, but when they get this popular, it is hard because then people are like, oh, I've heard of this book. And one of our friends messaged me the other day and works at a bookstore and was like, somebody came in to get the second book in the Haunting Aelin series for their teenager. And she was just like, this is not a teenage book. But, like, that's the thing that more so, like, I feel like people need to look more into the books they're buying, especially if they do have triggers. And, like, that, I think that's just something that needs to be said across the board. But I do feel like it's kind of getting harder to buy books for children. Not children, but, like, teenagers and stuff. And, like, making sure that they're not reading this kind of book. Because I don't think that Haunting Aelin about somebody stalking a woman and then, like, ending up with her is appropriate.
No.
For teenagers who are just figuring out what feelings and love is.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess that's the thing too, right? Is like all of and I will say that I just find all of these books, and it is completely preference based. I understand that. But I find so many books are getting so popular, and then you read it and the writing is just not good. I guess long story short, we feel that Book Talk is sort of giving a platform to genres of books that maybe would not have that voice, but also hyping books that maybe, I don't want to say don't deserve the hype, but maybe like wouldn't normally get the hype if they were just released in bookstores.
Yeah. And like, I don't know. It's good and it's bad. And I really do think you kind of have to find somebody who has a similar taste to you and, like, listen to their opinion. So it is kind of similar to, like, when we were younger and there was no Book Talk and Bookstagram, and we'd read books because of what our pairs were reading who read like us, and also, like, you'd go to the bookstore and get recommendations there. So I feel like it's kind of similar to that. Like, you kind of need to know who you're getting it from, because, like, people do jump on a bandwagon just so that they get more views and more popularity. But that just adds more hype to books that, like, increases expectations. And I find sometimes that's, like, the biggest hurdle is you've hyped this book up so much on TikTok that, like, when I do read it, I'm like, really? That was the moment that they, like, posted about? We're raving about this? Hard to say.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I guess we'll get into it. So as a heads up, this is not a spoiler-free zone, and things might get saucy.
Last week, Aelin did what no one else could do and saved her cousin Aelin from the noose? No, from getting his head chopped off.
Yeah, with his own sword. It's a bit brutal.
Yeah, it is a bit brutal. So saved his life, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Put some things in motion, some plans, and was reunited with our white-haired bae, Rowan, and it was a sweet moment.
We love him.
A bunch of other things happened, but
those
are the two big things, people.
Yeah.
So we are reading chapters 30 to 47 this week. So we start off in Dorian's point of view, and he is describing a room that the demon in him likes to visit. And he says that the demon, like, lets him see out of his eyes only sometimes. And the room actually has a bunch of pedestals in it with crowns on cushions. So it's like a crown room.
Mm-hmm.
Like the royal jewels sort of a thing. And he says that after the woman tried to kill him, aka Aelin, he has let the demon just take control of his body. He isn't fighting it anymore because he's just so tired and he's frustrated that the woman didn't get to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And the demon tells him that this is a secret room of crowns, and they are from all the conquered kingdoms. So, like, they're collecting all the crowns from all the places they've conquered. And the demon even says, like, more will come. Maybe even crowns from other worlds. So the demons and the Valg fully intend to visit other worlds to conquer other places.
Yeah. And, like, I think it was mentioned before in this book that, I think maybe Aelin and Ren were having a conversation, and Ren said that, like, the Terracin crown was destroyed and the throne was destroyed. So this is a secret room that's interesting.
Yeah, so maybe the crown wasn't destroyed. Maybe it's hiding here.
Yeah.
Anyway, Dorian, like, at this revelation, like, doesn't even care anymore.
Yeah.
He's like, whatever. And the demon, like, laughs and calls him spineless. And says, like, no wonder she lost her head, a.k.a. Sorsha.
Yay.
Insinuating that, like, this is Dorian's fault because he's not strong enough, essentially.
Yeah.
But, so Dorian, like, tries his best to shut out the voice, but obviously he can't, and he wishes the woman had killed him. And I'm pretty sure last week he said that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we were bitching about Kale.
So, he wishes it again.
Yep.
Damn it, Kale. So, we skip over then to Manon's point of view. She is going into Parrington's war tent and wants to know why the 13 are being denied access to the Yellowlegs clan. So, last week, Manon had to give up a clan to be artificially inseminated, I'm saying, bred with demons. And initially, Parrington wanted a Blackbeak clan, but a Yellowlegs clan volunteered, so Manon was like, here, this clan volunteered, have them. Mm-hmm. But now, her and her witches are being denied access, so they're not being allowed to visit them or see how they're doing at all.
Mm-hmm.
And Parrington just tells Manon to get out. Not even entertaining. And Manon sees Kaltain then, and she has this aura of, like, dark fire surrounding her body. And she has her hand outstretched towards, like, a sobbing soldier. And there's this fire, this dark fire, extended from her fingers around the soldier's body. And Manon asks where the fire's, like, what the fire is and where it's coming from, whatever. Mm-hmm. And Kaltain then answers that it's shadow fire. And at the time, I think Duke Parrington is very surprised that Kaltain is speaking and answers.
Yeah.
Right? So Manon asks where it came from, and Kaltain tells her it's always been inside of her, but it's been asleep. But now it's been awoken. And the idea of it is that it tortures people without leaving a mark on their body. So, like, they feel pain, but you can't see the pain. And this is sort of the moment where I feel like Kaltain is sort of the opposite to Aelin. Right? Like, where Aelin is sort of, she's blonde, like, she's light, she's got, like, real fire, like red fire. Mm-hmm. Kaltain is the opposite. She's got dark hair, she's got shadow fire. So, like, they're sort of the opposite of each other.
Yeah, I like that.
Manon sort of asks, thank you, yes, sometimes. So Manon asks, like, what did that soldier do to warrant being tortured? And Kaltain's like, nothing, he's just a normal guy. Mm-hmm. And Manon sort of says that, like, Kaltain is like a ghost. Like, she's like a robot. She doesn't have any emotion when she speaks. and it's like she's barely there.
Mm-hmm.
And Parrington, like, orders her to stop and to go lie down. So she just does, immediately. And then Parrington goes over and snaps the soldier's neck.
Hey.
And asks what Manon wants. So, like, he's very brutal.
Yeah.
And she asks again why she can't see the Yellowlegs clan. And she thinks to herself, maybe she should write a letter to her grandmother, and that her grandmother will come down and shred the humans when she finds out. Even though she's already written a letter to her grandmother about picking a clan, and she's like, just do what he wants.
Yeah.
So, like, I can't imagine this going well.
Yeah, no, not at all.
But, hey, you do you. Like, I feel like Manon thinks her grandmother is so much better than she actually is.
Yeah, I don't really get it.
Anyway, she asks if she's being punished because she didn't offer up a Blackbeak coven, and he says no. But then he also says if she disobeys him again, he might send his Valg princes to visit the witch barracks, and he's like, we'll see who survives.
Mm-hmm.
And Manon is, like, enraged because she sees this human threatening her, but, like, she wants to be smart. And she asks, like, well, what else are you doing under the... And he says, don't bother he's like, I'm not telling you, so don't bother asking. Don't bother scouting the area because her scouts won't see daylight. So, like, essentially he's saying, like, if you send anyone to look and see what I'm doing, I'll kill them. Like, don't even try.
Yeah.
But he does release a little bit of info that the witch matrons, the three of them, the Blackbeaks, the Yellowlegs, and the Blue Bloods, are conspiring together to build a weapon for her. And in Manon's point of view, this means, like, the humans won't stand a chance. Like, whoever they're battling is gonna, like, they're just all gonna die.
Yeah.
So then we move to Elide's point of view. So she wakes up hearing Manon tell Sorrel and Asterin to post lookouts at the barracks. So she's worried now about the witches because Parrington sort of made that threat. So she's like, put scouts out there like 24 hours a day. Elide actually heard somebody in her room. She was going to her room to go to bed, I guess, and heard someone in there. So she was like, well, I'm not going in there now. So she actually went to the eyrie where the wyverns sleep. So she went there initially just to wait. But then she leaned against a wall close-ish to Abraxas. But she was so cold, and I guess he could tell, so he slid closer to her until she was, like, right up against him. And he, like, folded a wing over her to, like, keep her warm, and she just fell asleep.
Sweet.
It was so cute. He loves her.
Yeah.
He's a lovey.
Such a sweet little baby.
Mm-hmm. So, like, she tries to sneak out. I don't know why. She should have just stayed where she was. Like, why try and sneak out? That just makes it worse.
Yeah, it does.
But she should have literally just stayed cloaked by his smell. Because, like, shouldn't she know by now that witches have a heightened sense of smell?
You'd think.
Anyway, so she tries to sneak out, but of course Manon catches her. And Manon now tells Elide that her job now, like, she's claimed her witch's bloodline, so she has to infiltrate the chamber with the Yellowlegs to find out what's happening to them.
Mm-hmm.
And Elide is like, dude, I can't. Like, this is dangerous for me to try and do. But Manon is like, if you choose not to, or if you're caught, that's your fault. Like, essentially saying, like, you've decided that you're one of us, you gotta pull your weight.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get a free ride. And, like, I get it. And I think that Manon is sort of being, like, Manon has been raised in a brutal household. So, like, I don't think that this is out of character, and I don't think that this is I think she's doing her best.
Yeah, like, I agree. Like, I don't think, like, I get that it's hard for Elide to do, but she's literally the only person that can do it. So, how else are you going to figure this out? It's the only option she has.
Yeah. Anyway, so Manon essentially says, like, you can sleep in my room if your room's not safe. But she also says, like, Blackbeaks aren't cowards. Mm-hmm. So you need... After Elide has, like, left to process this news, Manon tells Astrid and Sorrel that she was actually the one in Elide's room to incentivize Elide and sort of, like, push her closer to them and to sort of, like, make it seem like she's less safe than she may be.
Yeah.
And essentially says, like, she is the most qualified to get into the chamber since the witches are all banned. Mm-hmm. We skip to Elide's point of view now. She, and, like, her plan of attack. So she spends a few days working in the laundry room. I guess because she's sort of a worker in the castle, she sort of, like, can go from job to job to job. Mm-hmm. So she's working in the laundry. She's working in the laundry for a few days. She gets to know the routines and figures out, like, what everyone's job is and sort of makes herself useful. And she finally makes her move and makes a plan to, like, get into the chamber, but anyway, so she comes across her uncle, like, essentially assaulting Kaltain. Like, his hand is at her throat and, like, her boob is just out. So, like, and he's, like, sort of, I don't know if he's being threatening, but, like, he's sort of, like, propositioning her and wants to, like, make a, wants her.
Make a baby. No, that's not.
Yeah.
No. That's not what it is, but yeah, it's very awful. Like, clearly she's not in her right mind at, like, in the broadest sense of, like, she doesn't talk, she's on a leash, like, all this stuff. Like, it's very predatory, and he is awful.
Yeah. So Elide, like, makes this excuse to take her away. And Vernon, her uncle, sort of insinuates that, like, he knows about her witch blood. And this whole time, Kaltain sort of just remains this vacant shell. And it's sort of unfortunate because we have no idea, and we never sort of find out how extreme Kaltain's abuse is.
Yeah.
Like, she is so vacant. We have no idea who's using her for her body, like, and how much abuse she suffers.
Yeah.
But we can assume it's a lot.
Yeah, and, like, we do get that, like, she has bruises on her arms, and, like, even in the second book, like, Duke Parrington was going down and raping her when she was in the dungeons. So, like, it's not good, for sure. So, after she, like, leaves, the fact that there's nowhere safe for her makes Elide, like, sick. So she goes right to Manon and asks for poison. But we don't know what for. Intense.
It'd be nice if she used it on her scumbag uncle.
Yeah.
So we skip to Aedian's point of view. So him and Rowan are working through, like, a sparring practice because he wants to prove that he can help and that he can hold his own. But Rowan kicks his ass and essentially tells him that if he speaks to Aelin the way he spoke to her when they got in their fight, he would cut out his tongue.
Yikes.
So I guess he did not approve of him and Aelin getting into a fight. Like, because he apparently said, like, a really nasty curse word at her.
Yeah.
And, like, we didn't know what it was, but he said something real nasty. So Rowan is like, do that again, and I will make it so you cannot speak.
Yeah.
So he also tells Aelin that, like, they are forming the backbone of Aelin's court, and they need to shape the code that the court and therefore the country will be known for. And they have to decide that they are going to protect and serve Aelin, each other, and Terrasen. So, like, they gotta have each other's backs, essentially, and, like, not squabble within the court.
Mm-hmm.
So Lysandra then shows up, and Aelin's like, let's go inside. And turns out Lysandra brought clothes for Rowan and thought that he was super handsome.
Mm-hmm.
So Lysandra, like, and I mean, he is super handsome, and she's seeing him, like, walk around in really tight pants and no shirt because he had no clothes. So it's like, woo!
So hot.
And Lysandra brought info that a bunch of the people that have been labeled as missing are actually being transported to Morath in prison wagons. So that's an interesting tidbit. They also discuss Lysandra's debts. Apparently her master Clarice keeps adding money the more Evangeline grows. So originally she was like, this is how much I think Evangeline would have made me, so this is what I'm adding to your debt. Mm-hmm. And she was like, okay, cool. But now, the more Evangeline grows, she's like, well, no, I think she actually could have made me even more money than that.
Yeah.
So she's, like, adding more and more money. So Lysandra says, like, she'll be paying off her debts for years.
Yeah.
And, like, I can only imagine, and I don't mean this in a disgusting way, it's only going to get harder for her to make money the more she works, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but it's also, and, like I assume that oh my god, her name is gone. You just said it.
Clarice? Evangeline? Lysandra?
I assume, like, I guess Evangeline is staying with them still, so, like, she is incurring debt that way too, because she's being housed and fed and clothed. So, like, how is anyone ever supposed to pay that off?
Yeah, good point. Anyway, Aelin offers to put Clarice in a grave where she will never be found. But Lysandra essentially says, like, not yet. I'm okay where I am right now. Kale then meets up with Aelin and Rowan. And Kale, like, he can't stop looking at Rowan. She says that, or Kale says that, like, he's handsome, but also seems to, like, suck all the air out of the room and is terrifying.
Good.
Yes, good. So Aelin wants Kale to fill in some info on a map of the castle and offers up some info about the prisoners being transported to Morath. And he's like, yeah, we're gonna go try and free them, and thinks that Aelin is now a queen, and she's not going to change her course or her direction, and, like, she's not going to consider anything other than what her planet is, and he's going to have to be ready when she frees magic to protect Dorian, because in his head, she's not going to hesitate the next time she gets a shot at him.
And we've been in Dorian's head, and that is what Dorian would prefer.
Yes, it is. So Aelin spends the next day just showing Rowan the city and, like, showing him around. So she takes him to the Royal Theater that is now closed because, remember, last book, the king killed the orchestra.
Everybody.
And she told him that Arabin had a box rented that she would come to when she had time. And she used to be so moved by the music that she would weep at the joy of it. And it's sort of what caused her to learn the pianoforte in the first place. So again, like, what I really love about SJM is that, like, each of her heroines sort of have this artistic outlet. Mm-hmm. So, like, Feyre had art. Bryce has dance. And Aelin has music.
Yeah.
And they all have this sort of, this creative need to let their emotions out, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah. Very healthy.
Yes.
Which is funny. They actually... Because, like, what the fuck in their lives is healthy? But...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they find actually a piano on stage, and he asks her if she'll play. And she hasn't actually played anything since before Nehemia died, but she knows that she might not get another chance, because she's about to, like, after she does what she has to do, she's gonna go to Terrasen, and, like, God only knows when she's gonna get access to a piano again.
Yeah, there's gonna be war.
Yeah. So she plays one of her favorite songs that she says is a celebration of life and pain. And she played like she had never played before. And when she finished, Rowan was, like, moved to tears and asked her to teach him how to play.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's a nice moment for them. On the way home, they stop at the bank. Rowan...
Sorry. The bank.
Stop at the bank, yep. Rowan isn't really happy that Aelin is spending her money to support them. And he asks, like, what's going to happen when the money runs out? And she says she has a plan, but she's not telling him what it is. And that sort of pisses him off, because he doesn't like that she's being, I'm your bloodsworn, you can tell me. But she doesn't. She just has this coy, like, you'll see, sort of a thing. So we move to Chaol's point of view. He is covered in Valg blood after killing 4 Valg. Nezrin killed 7. So, like, he's not even that useful.
No. And also, remember when he had, like, qualms about killing people? And he...
Remember when he told Aelin last week that she was a bitch because she killed some Valg?
Yeah.
Oh, you have no issues killing people. He just killed 4. Nezrin killed 7.
And he admired her.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. Yep.
He is such a hypocrite.
Yep.
I hate it.
I know. Sorry, I just had to bring that up again to piss you off.
Anyway, they ambushed these Valg to free a group of prisoners. And Nezrin is still pissed at Chaol that he snapped at her the other day.
Good.
Insinuating that she was just a distraction. Yep. And he tries to make up for it by asking her to go for a drink to celebrate. And, like, initially she's like, no. Like, why? Like, I'm just a distraction, blah, blah, blah. But eventually he convinces her that, like, no, he really just wants to spend time with her. So she agrees. And they sort of speculate why the king is making his big push. Like, he's had years for all of this. So why is he only doing it now? And Chaol's like, oh, it must be because Aelin declared herself, so now he feels like he has to, so it's all her fault. Meh, meh, meh. But Nezrin is like, this has been going on and has been too big of an operation for it to have started in the past 2 months. So, like, this has been in the works for a long time. And I guess it's sort of like, meh, okay.
She's a voice of reason in this entire series.
Yeah. So we go back to Aelin's point of view. So she sneaks out of bed and doesn't wake anybody and sneaks out of the apartment. And she sets a trap while she's out. She follows, like, a Valg commander through the sewers and holds, like, a pretend conversation between her and herself, but, like, she throws one of her voices to make it sound like a dude, so it's like she's conversing with someone else, but she isn't. And she talks about a key, and then she throws the extra cloak she brought into the chamber with the Valg creature before ducking out of the sewers. So, like, she went to that big stone gargoyle creature thing, she found it, and then, like, threw her voice so that somebody could hear a conversation. And then, I don't know what the cloak was about, but threw it in.
I think, isn't it? Yeah.
It makes sense.
Cloak? But how did she get that?
I don't know. It's an extra cloak.
I think we do get something else about it.
Yeah. So she throws it into the chamber with the big Valg stone gargoyle monster thing, and then she ducks out of the sewers. And she hears boots scrape on the stones towards the cape. And it turns out all of this was like a setup for Lorcan. Because we heard in the last week that Lorcan has come to town. They think it's to get the third word key for Maeve. So she apparently let him pick up her scent on purpose and follow her around. And she actually set a trap for him with the vowed creature. So I guess he walks into the chamber with the vowed creature, not realizing what's going to be.
I guess he expects it to be her and a guy, potentially Rowan, but yeah.
Someone. Yeah. So she walks away and she hears him like fighting. So she like ambushed him with the creature. So she's like, I did good. However, he ambushes her on her way home and he hits her against the wall and like holds a knife to her throat, saying that he's going to kill her because obviously she set up a fight between him and the stone gargoyle dude. But she also had a knife out, held to his peen. And she's like, you slit my throat, I'll slit your peen off. Which I think is very, it's like a great idea. Yeah. So he obviously lets her go because he wants to keep the peen. And he essentially, like, they have some, like, back and forth calling each other names until Rowan comes up behind Lorcan with a knife to his throat. So maybe she wasn't as sneaky as she thought. And Lorcan essentially says, like, if you kill me, Maeve is going to ally with the King of Aderlin, so, like, you can't kill me. And he also tells them that they made a mistake in showing Maeve the vision of Aelin holding the key. So I guess the end of the last book, they showed her...
Yeah, so Narok gave her a vision before she killed him as, like, a warning of, like, if you take the keys for yourself and you become all powerful, like, this is what could happen. So then she showed that vision to Maeve as if it was, like, certain that was going to happen.
Yeah. So he asks what Rowan is going to do once Aelin is, like, old and wrinkly, seeing that she's mortal. Which, like, I don't know how they've established this yet. She's half fae. She has a fae form. I just, like, I don't understand.
We're assuming this at the moment? Me neither. It makes no sense.
So, anyway. So, like, the fact that she's immortal, like, I don't know if they've fully thought about it yet. But, like, it bothers them. But they obviously can't talk about it right now.
Yeah, and, like, obviously it would bother them. You get that. But, like, I just don't understand why we're making this assumption.
Yeah. Agreed. Anyway, Lorcan leaves and tells them, like, one day she's gonna slip up and and she's like, yeah, I got a score to settle with you too, after you whipped Rowan and Dornell. Like, he's the one that whipped him, so she's like, you and me, we're gonna go for it. They go back to the apartment, and Rowan is, like, really pissed that Aelin essentially is like, you need to take me with you next time. But she doesn't like being ordered. And she's like, there are some things that I want/need to handle myself. So, essentially, fuck off. And, like, I think both of them have their points. Like, I think she is so used to working by herself that she thinks she's just she just thinks that she has to keep doing that, even though she doesn't. However, I don't think that Rowan has the right to be like, well, now that we're, like, I'm saying together, now that we're a pair, like, you have to take me wherever you go. And I don't think that's right either. Like, she can do things on her own. But, you know, I do think that she should open up.
Yeah. And it's, like, a common theme,
you know what I mean,
in the coming books of her not telling people things. Which I think a lot of it is actually so that like, the reader doesn't know them. I think that's a lot of, like, if it's a secret from everyone, then the reader doesn't know. But yeah, it's definitely a theme, and I agree with you. Like, she's just used to it this way. So, like, it's hard to change. And it's hard to trust someone when the last time she did was with Sam in Assassin's Blade, if you've read that. So, like, it's definitely gonna be difficult for her to start opening up, especially since now she has multiple people that she needs to basically open up to. So
yeah. Anyway, so we go to Dorian's point of view. The demon forced him to watch some people be tortured in the dungeon, and he thinks they're familiar, but he can't remember their names. So, presumably, we might know who they are as well.
It'll come up later.
It will come up later. And one of them begs him for help, but, like, there's nothing he can do because he's not in control. All he can do is watch them suffer and scream. Anyway, so he just watches them suffer, scream, and then we go right back to Aelin. We're, like, ping-ponging. So her and Rowan and Aelin are eating dinner in the apartment when Lysandra comes by. And she flirts with Rowan a little bit, just like innocently, not actively. And they sort of haven't met each other yet. And Rowan calls Lysandra a shapeshifter. So again, Rowan dropping bombs. Like he's dropping the truth bombs everywhere.
Yeah.
This is the third one in like 3 days. And everyone else is, like, shocked. And he's like, yeah, like, all shifters smell the same, and I've met a few. And Lysandra sort of, like, gives us her backstory about her life as a shifter. She says that it must have been from her father's side because she lived with her mother. And her mother actually kicked her out at the age of 7. Because she accidentally shifted in front of her. And she said, like, she knew even from a very, very young age that she could do it, but that it was something that she shouldn't do. But she did it once as an accident, and her mother, like, because they lived in Rifthold and magic wasn't trusted, and it was outlawed, her mother just, like, kicked her out. So she lived on the streets, and she used her powers to survive. And, like, some days she would be a bird. Some days she would be a cat. Like, she would just change to help, like, eat and whatever. But she also found that making herself into a prettier child, like, when she was begging for money in the streets, money would come faster. And it was that face that Arabin found her in. And that's the face she got stuck in. When magic fell. And I'm like, thank God she got stuck in a pretty face and not as like a rat or a fly. Like, and I'm like, if she got stuck as a fly, would she then have a fly's lifespan?
But it's also like, I don't, like, when you're a child shapeshifter, can you only turn into children? Because, like, could she have been an adult when, like, if she turned into an adult and then everything changed, she'd be like 20. No, 30 at this point. So I just, there's a lot of questions about it. And also the whole aging thing. Like, I wouldn't think that a shapeshifter would just, even with magic on, I wouldn't think that a shapeshifter would just start aging in the body that they're in. It seems like you'd almost think they just stay the way they are.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And she actually adds to that she finds it really sad because she was stuck in that pretty face when magic fell, and, like, now she forgets what she looked like. And if magic comes back, she wouldn't be able to go back to her normal face because she needs to have a reference to shift, right? She needs to know what she's shifting into. And even if she did remember her face as a child, I think she actually says, like, she doesn't know what that face would have grown into, so she doesn't have a reference to shift back.
Which is sad.
It is sad. Like, and it's funny because you would think that if you're a shifter, you would have, like, your standard preset is what I'm calling it. So, like, you'd think she would just be able to be like, I'll just remove all of my shift and just, it would naturally revert back to normal.
Yeah,
but I guess not.
It's definitely interesting, like, getting some details on shapeshifting, because, like, I have so many more questions now.
I guess she was kind of nervous for everybody to find out, but Aelin's like, man, you make a fierce ally, bitch. Like, she doesn't actually say bitch, but she says, like, you would be such a fierce ally to me, and that makes Lysandra happy that she's not being judged for what she is, because I guess she's gotten a lot of, there's a lot of stigma against her. So Lysandra tells them then as a group that Arobin plans on calling in his favor tomorrow. So he wants the demon brought to him tomorrow, the Valk demon that she promised him. And then he wants her to stay for dinner. And he actually wants all of them to come, Aelin and Rowan. And Lysandra's like, it's probably a trap. And they're like, yeah, we know. So Aelin walks Lysandra to her coach, and they talk a little bit in riddles, as if, like, they have a plan that no one else knows about. And I guess they say, like, about, like, the talk is, like, will they be ready in a couple of days, and they can't talk until, quote-unquote, after. So they obviously have a plan. And she asks Aelin if she's mad that she kept the shapeshifter thing from her, but Aelin's like, no, I understand. Like, that's a secret that can get you killed. I totally get keeping it under wraps. Which, I mean, valid point. Aelin also kept a secret.
Yeah. That
would have gotten her killed, right? Like,
and at the time that came out, we were like, is this a bit hypocritical? So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just, like, they are so similar in so many ways. So, the next morning, they get their invite to the Assassin's Keep, and Arobin actually sends Aelin a little gift. It's perfumed skin oil for Aelin to wear. That's Arobin's, like, personal scent. And I think it's supposed to be sort of, like, almondy. And it's sort of, like, they view it as a threat, but also, like, an ownership sort of a thing. Like, you're rubbing your scent, my scent into you, you're mine. And it's sort of very, how can I say this? It's very tailored, I think, a very tailored threat to Rowan and Aelin, because the Fae value scent so much, and, like, when you smell like someone else, there's, like, a, you know, there's a deeper connection involved between the two. And, you know, like, so that whole idea, so I feel like this whole scent thing, even though Arobin is human and Aelin is half human and Aelin is half human, like, this scent thing is very tailored to the Fae side of it, which is a genius on Arobin's part.
Very smart.
I'm sort of shocked about what happens.
But so much other shit happens because of it too, so.
Yeah. So Aelin and Rowan go hunting for a Valg, but they visit the stone creature first, and Lorcan did kill it. So not only was this sort of a trap for Lorcan, but it was sort of a test to see whether the creatures can be killed in general, and also whether they can stay dead. And also, because the king can see out of the creature's eyes and, like, talk through them, now he recognizes Lorcan's face, and it'll be on high alert to get Lorcan. So, like, sort of, Lorcan's now on a higher hit list, and, like, he's known by the king. So he's not just some anonymous, like, shadow in the wind that, like, no one knows about. Like, the king now knows he's here. So Aelin tells Rowan that, like, as soon as Lorcan, like, I guess, I don't know why, but they're thinking that Lorcan's gonna kill all the creatures. Well, I think they
just assume the creatures are after Lorcan, so he's gonna have to.
Yeah.
Which is a bold assumption to make.
Yeah. So she said she's going to actually use the sewers to get into the castle to blow up the tower. That's her plan. But she wants to wait until he's killed the creatures first. So, like, he's sort of doing a job for them. So they tail some Val commanders, and they pick one very specifically. They pick one that sort of still has, like, jerky movements and doesn't seem to have lost all of the humanity inside of him. So they interrogate him, and turns out the human is still inside. And they ask if they take the ring off, will he come back? And he says he doesn't want to, because the demon has made him do terrible things. So, like, even if they could bring the guy back, he doesn't want to live after all the things he's done. And she asks him if Dorian is still in there, the way he's still in there. And the guy doesn't know, but he says he never heard him or saw him speak as him. So she offers him death in exchange for something. Don't know what.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. That night, she wakes up. She had a nightmare, and she gets out of bed. She has one more thing to do. So she goes and does it. And when she gets back in bed, Rowan wakes up, and he's pissed. She didn't tell him what she did. Like, he was like, you left again, and you didn't take me with you.
We had this conversation, even though you didn't agree to it.
Yeah. Yeah. So she told him, like, it was something low risk, and don't worry about it. But that was a lie. So she just rolls over and goes to sleep. Rowan, we go to Rowan's point of view now. He wakes up, and he's still pissed. Like, he's pissed that she did what she did. And he notices that she wore his shirt to bed. And he's got this, like, male satisfaction that she's wearing his clothes. And, like, he obviously has romantic feelings for her, but he is not letting them show at all. And he says he has to exercise a ton of self-control every day not to touch her. Yeah. I know. Just touch her already. Just touch her. Do it. And he's annoyed, though, that she seems to just do whatever she wants. And it's like, yeah, dude, she's a woman
also
with agency.
Queen. What, like, you think when she, you think when she actually takes over her throne, she's not going to do whatever the fuck she wants?
Yeah. So, but, like, she sort of, I call it sort of extending an olive branch this morning. She asks if he'll go somewhere with her before they go to Arrowhead. So he says, of course. So they actually go to Sam's grave. Wesley explained in his letter that Arobin left the headstone blank as sort of a, like, fuck you sort of a thing. But Wesley actually hired someone to fill out his name and put the dedication beloved. So it's Sam. So she sits at the grave and talks to him and just, like, tells him that she misses him. She can't believe he's gone. She wonders if they would be, like, married or, like, you know, just thinking of what her life would be like with him. So she actually brought these rocks with her, these stones, because, again, in Terracin, they don't do flowers because they die. They do stones because stones are forever. So she picks out 3, like, pretty pebbles and puts them on his gravestone. 1 pebble for their year together, and 2 pebbles for how long he's been gone. And she tells him that she misses him every day, and that she thinks he would have been an amazing king. So, like, that's how serious they were with each other. It's like, they were gonna be forever. They would have gotten married. He would have been king of Terracin with her being queen. And she says that the people would have probably loved him more than they like her. And she doesn't know if he was her mate, because, again, she's half fae, so the insinuation is that she would have one. And she wonders if she'll spend her life wondering about that until she meets him in the afterlife when she knows for sure.
Just so sad.
And Rowan, it is so, so sad. Like, the fact that, it's sort of glossed over in the last few books about how much she still misses him and how much, like, his absence still affects her. So Rowan comes up behind her, and she tries to explain who Sam was, but Rowan, like, he's like, I don't need you to explain. I guess because in his mind, he had Lyra or Lyra or whatever, and sort of like, that's your Lyra, right? So he actually picks out his own pebble to place on the grave as sort of a, this was your person, like, you know what I mean? And he asks if Aelin is planning on killing Arabin tonight. And she tells him, yeah, she's going to go back after everyone is asleep. And he then asks, like, about the amulet of Orinth, like, is all this a revenge thing, or do you actually want it or need it? And she tells him that it is endgame to get that amulet, but it's also a distraction. And she is ready. Which is
good. We go over to Elide's point of view now, and she brings bread to the laundresses at, I guess, supper, and she poisons half a dozen rolls. Not enough to kill anybody, but enough to make them too sick to work. And she makes sure that the laundress who helps with the Yellowlegs clan gets one of the poisoned ones, and then puts the rest of them randomly out so that a bunch of them get sick. The next day, a third of the laundresses are sick, so Elide goes to help. She works all day, and then she gets the blue blood sheets that are, like, covered with blue blood and vomit. Yeah, but it's blue blood. Yeah.
Oh, blue/blood.
The blood that is blue, yes. Not. It is the Yellowlegs blood that is blue, but not the blue-blooded blue bloods.
Not the Blue Bloods clan's blood.
As I was saying it, I was like, this is confusing. But yes, Yellowlegs. So she washes them, and then she brings them down to an iron door. And there are, like, claw marks, like, protruding. So, like, people from the inside were clawing against it, one would presume, with iron claws. And she can hear moaning. And she hears moaning. So she knocks. And then she pretends to fall to buy time, so that she can see, like, what's going on inside. We go over to Manon's point of view now, and Elide is vomiting. And apparently someone, like, lesser clan, Blackbeak, found her shaking, like, in a puddle of her own piss in a corner somewhere, and brought her to Manon. Elide tells Manon and Astrid and Sorrel that she saw the chamber, and there was a beautiful man who was not human who opened the door, and darkness leaked out of him. And Elide asks if they knew how many times the witches were to be implanted, because apparently the witches have at least delivered one child already, and are very pregnant and about to deliver another child. So, like, it's only been, like, 2 or 3 weeks, hasn't it? It hasn't been that long.
No,
so
it hasn't been that long.
Gestation period is very small, we're assuming. She also tells them that, like, she saw these babies, and that they're not babies, they're not witchlings, they're creatures, and they are, like, evil already. They apparently have skin that's black, and snouts, and black fangs, so pretty scary. The witches are also chained to the tables and begging to be let go, so that they're clearly in terrible condition. At this point, Astrid is furious, and she tells Manon that she let them do this, and she starts to, like, almost cry and, like, tear up, which is, like, not very witch-like to have emotions at all. Manon grabs Astrid by the throat, and Astrid actually digs her nails into Manon's arm and, like, makes Manon bleed, which is, like, a killable offense because she is the heir. And Manon ends up demoting her to third, and Astrid just says, like...
Huh? Demoting her from third.
Yes, demoting her from third.
She's already third.
So now she's, I assume, fourth. Yeah. Is there a fourth? Who's she putting in third? Don't know. But she's demoting her. But Astrid just says, so you're not going to do anything about this. And Manon tells her she'll get her punishment tomorrow, and if she does anything else, the next punishment will be death. And Astrid just says that Manon wouldn't do anything, even if it was Blackbeak's. And Sorrel then tells her, like, she should let this go and to leave while she can. And Manon can see hurt on Astrid's face that, like, Sorrel isn't as enraged as she is and isn't, like, doesn't have her back. Elide's point of view, she is currently binding Manon's arm because Astrid made her bleed. And
but like binding it, don't they have extra
know.
strong, like, don't they have quickened healing? Like in my mind it was just a scratch. Like, why would she need to be
I know, I don't get it. Like, did she just go super deep? Just like dig her nail all the way through her arm? Like, I don't really know. But that seems worse. But anyway, so she's binding it. But Elide asks if their broken kingdom is worth it, and Manon tells her she wouldn't understand because she's not immortal without a homeland. And Elide tells her the king conquered her kingdom and executed everyone she loved. And her uncle stole her land and her title, so she understands what it is to hope. But Manon just comes back and says, like, this isn't hope. Like, they don't have feelings. They can't feel hope for something. This is just, like, they need a homeland. Yeah. But Elide just basically disagrees with her again. And Manon asks Elide, like, why she plans to run if, like, her uncle has her title and shit. Like, why wouldn't she want to stay and fight, even though it would be against Manon? But Elide tells her that her mother died defending Aelin Galathinius, and that even though they say she died, Elide thinks she could have lived with her fire magic, because they all heard that, like, she died in the river. And that is the hope that Elide is kind of clinging to, that Aelin will save her. And, like, that has been something that, like, she's always hoped for growing up. But, like, it kind of feels like Elide is giving up on it a bit at this point. She's, like, not even giving up on the fact that Aelin is living, but that Aelin will remember her and come save her, which is so sad.
Yeah.
Manon asks if she would go to Aelin if Aelin was alive. And Elide says she would fight tooth and claw to get to her. So that's good to know for us. And foreshadowing?
Yeah.
Ish. Manon then asks Elide if she thinks monsters are born or made. And Elide for a second thinks back to, like, the witchlings that are basically already monsters. And she's like, yeah, they can definitely be born. But she knows that that's not really what Manon is asking. So she just says that she's not the one that needs to answer that question. Because obviously she can tell that Manon is having, like, a crisis of conscience. Yeah.
Yeah.
We go over to Aelin's point of view now, and it's super short, but Aelin is basically just in the bathroom psyching herself up to put on Arobyn's oil. And it's very, like, kind of like you said, but it's very ownership, very predatory, very, like, she's demoralized putting it on. She feels dehumanized. Like, she feels owned by doing this. It's really sad. But she knows, like you said, that it is another game to him, and it is because there's a fae there that he wants her to do this. We go to Rowan's point of view now, and he and Aelin go to chat on the roof, and they talk about Aelin's choice to kill Arobyn tonight, and Rowan asks what Aelin will do if she spares Arobyn. And he says it's her choice. And then Rowan asks what if she asks them to do it. And Aelin tells Rowan that he got the blood oath, so he gets to kill Arobyn if they're the ones that are allowed to do it. You're like, cool.
Yeah.
We go over to Aelin's point of view again now, and she comes out, and Aelin tells her if she didn't already scare him, she does now. And then Rowan turns around, and she's wearing, I think we heard about this dress already, but she's wearing, like, it's a tight black dress. It's got a giant golden dragon on the back. And Rowan just looks, and she can see ravenous hunger in his eyes. And I'm not even going to get into the thing I always bitch about, like, how you can tell what you see in somebody's eyes. Because, like, they have a mind, like, they talk mind to mind sometimes. So, like, I'm just going to assume that that's part of it and not even care as much as I normally do. So. But he's like, fuck. But she just says he asked to see her in this dress, and he says she looks like the fire-breathing bitch queen that the bastards claim she is, which I love.
Yeah, because I think we heard about it maybe in the first, or maybe last week or the first week. She talked about this dress.
Yeah,
it must have been last week, and how like she bought it. She loved it and bought it, but she felt like she couldn't wear it because she hadn't grown into it. Like,
yeah, it felt well, and like at the time, like she's only 19 now or something. So 19. At the time she bought it, she was probably like 16, 17. So like it makes sense. Yeah. So she looks hella hot. So they go to obviously the Assassin's Keep together for this supper. And Aelin just tells them to keep their mouths shut and not to get in her way. Or to get too, like, fey about everything and territorial, because, like, obviously that's what's expected. Nezrin is actually driving them, and Kale is across the street on a roof as a lookout. So, they're not being dumb, so that's good. That's one thing we can say about Kale helping them, is it's good that they're not being dumb. Yeah.
Right now.
Nezrin and Aelin actually bring the Valg up to the front door, and obviously Arobynn is pissed that they're using the front door. But it's all power moves between them. They're all like, it's so much of it is power moves. Arobynn then tells Aelin that she looks and smells divine. Then she introduces her cousin. And then he looks to Rowan and says it's been an age since he's seen a fae. He didn't remember them being so large. And I love it. I'm like, yeah, fuck off. He could eat you. He could literally bite your head off. And then Rowan actually thanks him for the oil and says his skin was dry. So Rowan also put the oil on. And it's just so considerate, I think. And, like, now both he and Aelin also smell the same, which is, like, important. And I just love it.
Especially for something that she found so, like, unpleasant having to do. The fact that he put it on, didn't tell her he put it on, just did it in solidarity is really, I think, a really important show to be like, we're together. Like, there's nothing you can make her do or have her do or that she does that I will not also do.
It's very, I love him.
And can I just say, it's also very, like, I don't know, it's anti-heteronormative, I'll say. You know what I mean? Like, a man to be putting on another man's, like, oil is, like, you know what I mean? I just find it's not something that, like, a man's man would
especially
would
I think since they are since Rowan is fae, he wouldn't want to smell like another man. You'd assume that he would, like, even anyone else in general he wouldn't really want to smell like. So, like, I get what you're saying, and I do agree. It's very not toxic.
Not toxic the opposite of toxic masculinity.
True. I love it. I think it's just a very nice thing to do. Arobynn then tells them to bring the Valg to the cells, and I guess Aelin kind of notices that there's no one else in the house. So, like, nobody else is around to see that there's a Valg here and to see what they're doing. So that's good.
Yeah.
Aelin looks to Rowan before she follows Arobynn down, and she reads him say, this is the mind thing. There's so much of it, but it's like, Sarah J Maas kind of makes it seem like they like read these things off each other, but it is impossible to know this much without actually having a full-on connection between your brains.
Yeah, like they can't just be conversing this way through looks alone. Like, you can't get that much from just a look. It has to be some sort of, like the whole Feyre Reese thing. Like, they have that mind connection and they talk to each other in each other's heads.
Yeah.
Right? Now, whether that's a result of
or them being Karen
like,
or like similar. Yeah.
Yeah. But so it seems like it's a similar idea here. But it's never sort of clarified that it's like a specific power that they have being Karanam, or whether it's just conversing through looks.
But like, so this one you can I could kind of see somebody be able to read off of somebody else, because she looks at him and she reads him say like, Arabin never specified, only she should wear it. And yeah,
the oil,
because that's why she looked at him, to be like, I didn't know you were wearing the oil. And he's like, he didn't say only you could wear it. And like, you could kind of have that conversation with somebody without words, maybe.
Yeah, like a raised eyebrow and a couple of raised eyebrows.
But the conversation later this week, there's no fucking way. But anyway, that's not the point. We'll get to that when we get to that. But Aelin thinks that he surprises her sometimes, and he thinks back good. So like, even that is too much. Like, there's no way she'd be able to, with her face or looks, be able to be like, you surprise me sometimes. I don't think. But so he thinks back good. He'd hate for her to get bored. And Aelin smiles, but then she notices that Arabin is watching them, and like, she can tell he's annoyed. Obviously, he's always going to be annoyed. He's not her number one.
But, annoyed that, like, her attention is not on him.
We go over to Rowan's point of view now, and he's already ready to kill Arabin for the training that he gave Aelin when she was a child. And this is just bringing it all up for him. Like, he's heard about it before, but this is the first time he's, like, met him, seen this place, all that shit. Rowan also knows that the dungeons and where they're going is, like, the last place that Aelin actually saw Sam. So she saw his body here. Like, so it's traumatic for her to be going down here. And Arabin knows that, Rowan thinks. So, not great. He can kind of tell that Aelin is thinking about Sam as they're walking down. And he touches her elbow and says silently that he'll kill Arabin, but she doesn't answer. Or, no, that's a lie. She answers not yet. So, like, you can't have that conversation when you're not even looking at each other. They literally just said words back and forth.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's being very sweet. Yeah, considerate. We go over to Aelin's point of view now, and she's obviously thinking of Sam and of what Arabin ordered done to Sam because of the letter that she read. And she knows that the reason Arabin had it done was because Sam loved her. So, and he was competing for Arabin's attention. And she was Arabin's possession. So she thinks at this point that, like, after Sam died, she laid next to him in this cold room, in this cell next to his body for hours, because obviously she was so distraught. So, like, it's just very sad. And, like, him bringing her down here to, like, re-traumatize her is awful.
And very obvious to everyone, right? And, like, you sort of, as they went down the stairs, Rowan, like, sort of mentions it. He could see her becoming less and less of herself. Like, folding in on herself more and more as she went down the stairs.
It's very sad. So Adian chains Sven to the wall, and Sven is the Valg. We got his name at some point, but Aelin thinks of him as Sven. So she they're all there, but Aedion chains him to the wall, and then Arobynn tells Aedion and Rowan to go upstairs, and Lysandra is in the drawing room waiting for them. They obviously don't want to, but Aelin nods to Rowan, and he kind of like corrals Aedion to get him to actually leave. Arobynn interrogates the Valg and asks how the king controls him, and he explains that it's the ring, and that the king would like cut them and lick their blood so that their blood was inside of him, and then he would be able to control them through the ring. So that's something we didn't know.
Yes, that's
and
true.
it's interesting. So he looks to Aelin then and starts pleading, and we kind of get the feeling that he's pleading to be killed because of the conversation that they had earlier. And she says that he's a liability. So Arobynn cuts off his finger where the ring is, and then he kills him. And she tells Arobynn that he should throw the ring away, but he says he needs to study it and that they should go eat. So, interesting. They're done with that. Aelin goes to the dining room and, like, takes Lysandra's hand to kiss her on the cheek or something, but hands her a piece of paper. Interesting. Then Aelin ends up sitting beside Lysandra and Arobynn and across from Rowan. And Arobynn asks to know more about Rowan and Aedion since his protege is living with them now. And Aelin says he didn't care who she lived with when he sent her to Endovir, and he's shocked that she actually thinks that he's the one that sent her there. Yeah, we all know he is, but he's like trying to say it wasn't him. But he says Lysandra can tell her the truth, and Lysandra like does a super good performance and says like he did try to save her from the prison, and like he was working on trying to get her out and all of this stuff. Arobynn then says like Aelin is much more subdued now, which is good for Lysandra since she threw a dagger at her head, I guess when they were 17. And like that story also is actually in Assassin's Blade, if you read that. And Rowan looks over at Aelin kind of questioningly of like, what do you mean? But they have a silent conversation back and forth, and it's kind of like, this is when you're like, this is way too much to actually be by look alone, because she's like, she'd pay good money for 17-year-old Aelin to meet 17-year-old Rowan, and he says like he wouldn't have known what to do with her, and then she tells him that she isn't wearing any underwear under the dress she's wearing right now. And Rowan, like, hits his knee off the table because he's so shocked that she's not wearing underwear. So scandalized.
But, like, it's a skin-tight dress.
Yeah,
what does he
I don't know. It's such a trope, and I'm like, if that, like, turned my boyfriend on, I never wear underwear. I don't know. Like, it's just... I don't know.
I think it turns a lot of dudes
It should be obvious. And she even says, she's like, where would I hide them with this dress? Like, where do you think they could possibly be?
Yeah. I mean, I agree.
But it just makes me think of how she's 19 and he's like hundreds of years old. Kind of gross. Yeah, why does she have to be so young? Anyway.
Yeah.
They notice then that Arobynn stops talking, but Aedion asks him something, so they go back to their conversation. And when it's silent again, Aelin's just like, oh, did you ask me something? And Arobynn asks then, for the second time, I guess, because she wasn't paying attention the first time, if she's had fun wrecking his investments and ensuring his clients wouldn't touch him. She tells him she doesn't know what he means, and he says, the vaults were destroyed, and the lockbox was left open to be looted, and, like, he had shares in the vault, which we knew about before. And he also says that she deliberately disguised herself as Hinsel Cormac when she freed Aedion, and that 2 carriages from his and Cormac's business went missing that same day, so Cormac told all of their partners that it must have been Arobynn pretending to be him. But obviously if we think back to when she did free Aelin, she did pretend to be somebody else. So she...
Yeah, and she had the dyed hair and everything like that. So, like, and she was pretending to be a dude. And I think it did mention even that, like, someone called out somebody's name and she waved a hand at them, right? So, 100%. But it's, like, tit for tat. Like, he was saying, like, she was like, oh, you sent me to Amdovir. And he was, like, shocked. He was like, I would never send you there. Like, you're my precious baby, like, protege. I would never. And now it's like, shoes on the other foot. He's like, well, you wrecked all my investments. And she's like, I would never. You know what I mean? Like, they're each doing shitty things to each other. Her side, much more valid. But, like, and then denying that they have any part in it. And they're like, oh, that's just that must be
wild coincidence there. But we do also know that, like, this is the information that Lysandra gave her, to use Cormac's name and likeness, which is good. He asks her then what it will take to stop her from being such a big pain in his ass, and she says a few things. So they actually go to his sitting room, and Rowan and Aelin are just outside the door, and she knows that because she knows them, but she thinks, like, Arobynn probably doesn't realize that. And he probably also doesn't realize how good their hearing is. So they sit together, and he asks if all of this is punishment for a crime he didn't commit. Like you said, he's really on the I didn't do that to you train here. And she asks why he wanted to make her a weapon when he knew very well who she was as a child. And he says, why not? He was young and angry, and the king's a bastard, and he wanted to give her the tools to defeat him, which he assumes is why she's back now. So you're like...
Yeah, it's all very altruistic of him.
And he asks what else he needs to do, and she says the debt is nowhere near paid. He tries to tell her that he tried to save her in Endovir, and he tells her he didn't have anything to do with Sam's death, and he says, like, they can take down the king together, and she knows that he's, like, putting, like, lies and truth together, trying to, like, make it seem true, and, like, she learned that from him, so it's just not really working on her. She also knows the truth, like, ugh. But she does say that she wants his resources, but they're going to, like, take down the king her way, and, like, obviously, like, we can think of... She obviously wants to let magic out, so, like, she would need... if she were to use his help to take out the king, she has her own plans. And she doesn't want to tell him all of them, obviously. But then the other side is, she said she was going to kill him tonight, so interesting. But anyway, this is what she's telling him. But he says, like, what is in it for him if, like, he gives her his resources? Because just today, the opioid dealer was caught and executed, and after he had survived the fire in the shadow market. So, like, and she's like, why is he giving me this information? Like, he's just trying to throw me off. So she tells him she won't tell the king about this house and his deals if he helps her. And he says he can threaten too, and he can tell them where Aelin and a Fae prince are. But she says that Chaol is already at the palace, like, near the palace, ready to tell if they don't all get out of this house alive. He will tell the king about Arobynn. So that's interesting. Right. He pulls the amulet out then, and she kind of starts to wonder if, like, he somehow was able to benefit from the power over the years of the amulet. Because he really did come from nothing and become... like, the king. Exactly. So, like...
King of the assassins, yeah.
It's interesting. But he hands it over, and her blood and bones feel that it is not right, and it's, like, singing to her. So, like, she can tell that it's in there, and, like, this isn't some replica or something. Like, she knows it's here.
She knows, yeah.
She tells Arobynn then that they'll meet tomorrow and plan together, and she tells him she knows he has the upper hand. But she says if he betrays them, she'll make what he had done to Sam seem like a mercy. And he says, this is where it gets as creepy as I think it gets. But he says he's going to enjoy having her back. And he puts the ring on her finger and, like...
The ring, like
the vow ring, yeah. And he cuts her hand with his thumbnail, which grosses me the fuck out. Like, get that disinfected immediately. And then, like, licks the blood off of his thumb. So he did what he was told he had to do, and she just drops the dagger that she had taken out to, like, she kind of felt something was happening, so pulled the dagger, but she drops it. And then he asks her to blink and then to smile, and she does both. So he is under the impression that he is able to control her now. Then he tells her, no, he asks her why she's back, and she says to kill the king and the prince, and then he asks her to tell him that she loves him, and then he's like, no, say my name when you say it. So she does, and he says he's going to like this. And he tells her to leave and not tell her friends and to come back in the morning because they have plans, and I quote, for our kingdom and for Aelin. So, like, our kingdom being Terrasen. Like, he now is planning to become king of Terrasen. That is what is happening here. There's no doubt to that.
So, like, this is where it gets even grosser, though, because remember we had this, like, debate, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, about, like, how, like, he has raised her from a small child, and now she's 19, and he is like, we're gonna get married, like, tell me you love me, like, that's
and he also called her my love, but, like, it's also just not surprising because he did the same with Lysandra. He didn't raise her, but he found her as a small child and then bought her virginity. So, like, he's not against that. And B, this is something that happens in the real world with powerful men when they're around women that and that they have, like, raised. Like, it's like, it's not super common, but it has happened multiple times with prominent men in society that are, like, raising a child, and then once they're of a certain age, they marry them. Like, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and one of the presidents did that, like, to a child that was essentially became his daughter when his friend died. I don't know what president. I don't know anything about the States, like, the past of it. And, like, that's obviously more in the past than now, but, like,
isn't there a celebrity guy that did it?
Woody Allen?
What's his name? Woody Allen, yeah. He married his, like, stepdaughter.
When she was of age, after, like, being in her life forever. Like, so...
And, like, Celine Dion, same thing. Like, I know they were happy, but, like, Celine Dion, he was her manager when she was, like, 14. And then they got married at, like,
there's
20,
a guy that it happened to recently, too. I don't want to say a name and then be wrong.
I actually also, like, there was this story of this, like, lady teacher who got into a relationship with with a student, was found out, went to jail for it,
but
he waited for her, and when she got out, they kept their relationship and, like, had kids and got married and everything. And I think there was, like, a documentary about it or something like that after. And that's been in the past, like, 10 years. And, like, I think she was, like, pregnant with his child in jail.
Yeah, so, like, there's a lot of situations where this happens, and it's very bad. But, like, can't really say that it's, like, shocking, which is sad. But it is disgusting. Anyway. I also, just to completely jump off of talking about that for a second, I love the way that Sarah J Maas wrote this, and, like, we'll know soon, but, like, Aelin's acting in this moment. Like, I love that you're like, wait, what is happening? Like, we know.
Yeah, I know. We're freaking out because we're like, oh my god, oh no, how are we going to get out of this?
Like, there has to be a Valg inside for it to make sense. So, like, this doesn't really make sense. And you're like, I don't really understand. But you're also like, she's doing everything he's asking. So what the fuck is going on? So it's, I love the way it's written.
Mm-hmm.
So we're over in Rowan's point of view now, and he is pissed. And they're in the carriage, and everyone is silent because she took Arobyn's carriage home. So, like, it's not like they can have a big old conversation in the back of it. But everybody's silent, and Aelin is just, like, very introverted and not talking to anybody, and, like, very meek seeming. Yeah.
Not looking at them, yeah. Almost vacant shellish.
He cannot get over the I love you that she said to Arobyn. And that is really raking at him at the moment. And you're like, interesting. Well, we kind of knew he heard all of it because of his Fae ears. But it's just interesting that one thing is grating so much at him. So when they get home, they go inside, and Aelin immediately just says her name, and she just says that, like, that was what she wanted to know, and she expected something grander than what actually happened. And I'm like, what the fuck did you expect? He, like, wanted to become king of Terrasen. What could be grander than that?
Yeah.
Ew. But then she takes off the ring. So we're like, oh, phew, thank fuck. We go to Aelin's point of view now, and Rowan asks if Arobyn checked Sven's other hand, and she says no. And then Aelin just is like, what the fuck is going on? Because he heard everything that happened, but obviously doesn't know what's happening now. But he's pissed that she didn't tell him. And she says she almost didn't tell Rowan about this. Like, and they had a fight about it too. So, like, basically to fuck off. But with not those words. But, like, this is a very common thing where, like, she keeps secrets. And like I said, I think a lot of it is literally just for the narrative of the book so that, like, the reader doesn't know. But I can understand how it annoys the other characters. But she does explain to him, like, they picked up a Valg that, like you said, seemed like the Valg didn't have as much control on the body. And then they had Sven lie to Arobyn, and the ring is actually a fake. It's from Lysandra's jeweler. And Aelin says, like, she had to have put this in place ages ago. And she's like, yep, I've always planned to basically do this. But she tells them, like, she had to know that Arobyn wasn't redeemable. Which, like, you can kind of understand. Like, he raised her. Like, it's very hard for her to reconcile the feelings. It's the same as, like, The Serpent and the Wings of Night. We had this conversation in that book of, like, he raised her too. So, like, when you're trying to reconcile somebody's actions versus, although it's much different in this case because he was, like, way more abusive. Yeah.
An asshole the whole
time. In the name
of
training her, he was very abusive. Anyway, so we actually go to Aelin's room now, and her and Rowan are looking at the amulet. And he can feel inside of it too, and they kind of figure out that, like, the people who normally were wearing the amulet had powers of their own, so that's probably why other people didn't notice or feel the power of the amulet when they were around them. They were just like, oh, that's the power of that person, because, like, it's obvious to them that there's something there. So Rowan asks her then what the word marks mean, but she only knows one of the word marks that's on it, and it is Brannon's mark, so, like, the nameless mark. So, like, it means bastard born, basically, but it's Brannon's mark. And I think Maeve is the one that told us what it means, but we first saw it in Throne of Glass, the first book, when it was on her forehead. She knows she needs to hide it under a loose floorboard, but she doesn't really want to touch it because she's kind of afraid of it. But she eventually does, because obviously she needs to put it away. And when she does touch it, she feels a thread between her and Rowan, and she feels what it is to be him. Which I'm like, I want more. Like, what does this... Tell me more.
Yeah, what does that mean? What does that do? And I don't know if that like
it
comes
doesn't
up again.
really. Like, it comes up this week again in Rowan's point of view, because this is her point of view. But I don't know if it comes up anymore, other than the obvious. But she kind of says, like, she feels how powerful he is and, like, what it would be like to be him. So, like, it's very interesting. And Rowan just says, oh, that'd be good in, like, when we're in battle and stuff. And she's like, of course, you're a warrior.
Yeah.
But then she starts to think about the key itself, and she says, like, the key is likely neutral by nature, and the bearer guides how it's used. And then she says, like, they must have always been pure of heart, and that's why, like, it was always good to them. And Rowan just kind of snorts, and he's like, there's no way that your ancestors were, like, completely holy. Like, that's just silly. Like, no person is all good or all bad. But, like, she's really... Yeah, exactly.
True story.
But she's really having, like, a crisis of conscience here, too, because she's an assassin, and she thinks that she is unredeemable. But he tells her the fact that she's worried enough about that says that her intentions are good, and he promises to stop her from, like, becoming a dark queen, basically. Yeah.
That's nice.
She also had Lysandra's jeweler make her a replica of the amulet, so she takes that out and puts it on her bureau just in case anyone is wondering about it, especially Aelin, since he doesn't know about this either. So it's just another secret. We go to Rowan's point of view now, and Aelin has been on the roof on watch for ages, and Kale came by and reported on Arobyn's men, and Rowan is like, that's enough, I'm gonna go up and talk to her. So he's going up to see her, but he thinks to himself that he was okay with Aelin seeing a glimpse into him as long as it didn't scare her. And he would have told her that, but he was too distracted by how hot she was. Yeah. So I love that he's not just the hot part. I love that too. But I love that he's like, as long as, like, it didn't scare her away, he's fine with her seeing that part of him and, like, what it's like to be him. So I do appreciate that, but, like you said, I don't really think this comes up ever again. So he tells Aelin that he'll take care of it, but she tells him that she already told Lysandra that she can do it, and, like, she deserves to be the one to kill Arobyn, because that's why he came up. She tells him it feels wrong, but she does wish there was another way. And, like, he was obviously bad. He would have, like, forcibly become king of Terrasen and maybe even sired. And then she kind of, like, trails off because she doesn't really want to, like, say it out loud. But obviously, like, he probably would have forced her to have children with him, which is awful. But she says, like, she also owes him her life. So, like we said, she's very conflicted about him. He puts an arm around her, and he thinks, like, he feels similarly about Maeve as she does about Arobyn. Like, Maeve helped him out of a very terrible time, but he also hates some parts of her. So, like, it's interesting. She tells him then that she needs him to hunt Lorcan down to see if he killed all the rest of the Wordhounds. And he asks what happens if it's necessary to kill Lorcan, and she says it's his call. And he kind of wishes that she said either way, but he also appreciates that, like, she gave him a choice. And then she asks him to burn her dress and sell the comb she's wearing, because, like, she doesn't want to wear it ever again. And
which is unfortunate, because the dress is, like, stunning on her, but at the same time, I get that she feels like it's dirty. Like,
yeah, definitely. And, like, I hope she gets a new one at some point and it's just as beautiful. Maybe with a stag on the back. Mm-hmm. He tells her it's a pity because her enemies would have fallen at her knees in the dress, but he agrees, and he just holds her there, and he thinks he'll stay there and hold her as long as she needs, because it's like they're outside and it's raining and he's just standing there holding her. So we go over to Aelin's point of view now, and she looks up at Rowan, and he asks what she's thinking, and she says, she wants to continue to unsettle him, and like every time that she's not wearing underwear, she's gonna tell him, and like she's like kind of teasing with him, but then she reaches up to his face and she says his name and she slides her fingers down, but then he stops her and says, "Don't touch me like that." And she obviously then is like, shit, of course, like he doesn't want to be touched by anybody after his mate died, and he wouldn't want this from her. So she apologizes and just like walks away, I guess. But we actually jump over to Lysandra's point of view, and Arobin is asleep beside her, and the rain is so loud now that she thinks like it's a good time to kill him. She prays to Themis, the goddess of wild things, who looks after her as a shapeshifter, and then she turns to him, and she knows that he would never expect the vapid girl that she is to be the one to kill him. So, like, he sleeps with a knife under his pillow. And she thinks to the note that Aelin gave her, and it just said, "He's all yours." And she thinks, like, he was rough with her tonight because he was smug and sure. And she saw that, like, Aelin and Rowan had a connection. And she wonders if, like, Aelin even knows that, but she knows, like, Arobin saw the connection between them.
Yeah. Because, like, they were just, like, completely in their own, like, world talking to each other. And, like, she didn't give Arobin, like, the time of day at all. It was like they were completely enraptured with each other. Even when Arobin purposefully separated them at dinner across the table, like, he couldn't take her attention away.
Although, like, across the table, you're like, now they're directly eye to eye. Like, that's... Of course she's going to be staring at him. He's hot. But yeah. No, I agree. But I also feel like we never really get too much into how awful, like, Lysandra has been treated. And this is just one instance of a small look into it, and it just, I feel so sad for her. Anyway, she thinks then that, like, she didn't hear any of the actual plans that Arobin made after, but she knows he did make them, and she knows that Rowan is obviously going to be the first target, because he, sorry, I don't know if you can hear that beeping, but he obviously is Aelin's number one now, so, like, the same with Sam, he's the first that needs to go. She turns over then, and she gets the knife, and she does it for Wesley, for Sam, for Aelin, and for herself, for the child she'd been, and for the 17-year-old she was when he took her virginity, and for the woman she is now. And she slits his throat. Yeah.
Woo!
I, like, goosebumps and, like, so heartbroken at the same time. We go over to Dorian's point of view now, and obviously we don't get that it's Dorian, but the prince inside of him is torturing someone on a table and telling him to watch. And the king asks where the rebels are hiding, but the person being tortured says he doesn't know, and the demon calls him a coward for begging, like, Dorian is begging the demon inside of him to stop, and the demon is calling him a coward. But, like, these are the same as before. We know who these people are. We just don't know at this moment who it is. Yeah. We go to Aelin's point of view now, and they take a carriage to the city, and she's feeling super embarrassed about last night trying to, like, hit up Rowan. Which is, like, not surprising.
I mean, it's valid. Like, if you get rejected and then still have to, like, be around someone very closely, like,
exactly,
it's gonna be embarrassing.
But on to what they need to deal with now. Arobin is dead, and she got word that she's required immediately by Turn, Harding, and Mullen at the Assassin's Keep, and they're the three assassins who have, like, seized the guild for the moment being. she thinks to herself, like, for one last time, she needs to be Selena Sardathian, and she, like, puts on her mask, and she tells Aelin and Rowan not to get in her way, and then she storms into the house, and she is, like, fierce. But she asks what the rutting hell happened, and she tells them to start talking now, and they ask, like, her to do the same. And then she hears a sob and looks over, and it's Lysandra and Clarice, and she asks why those two whoring pieces of trash are there. So, like, this is something. But Turn says it's because Lysandra was next to him when he died, and Aelin approaches her, but Lysandra is, like, very meek and very much like, sorry, I didn't do it. Like, you can't think it was me. Like, that kind of stuff. And
Yeah. And, like, still covered in his blood, too, from sleeping next to him.
And Clarice is just like, Arobynn was her best client. She would never do anything to him. Like, he was helping her pay off her debts. Like, that wouldn't make any sense. So she's kind of convinced that it wasn't Lysandra. Obviously, all this is an act, because we know what happened. But she asks the assassins where they found him, and they say his room, but he is currently downstairs. So she goes upstairs to check the scene, and she takes Rowan, but she leaves Aelin and tells him to gut Lysandra and Clarice if they make a move. So the bedroom is like a complete bloodbath. Mullen says someone must have slit his throat and then just let him choke on his blood until he died. So yuck, but also fitting. She sees footprints by the window, and she asks about them, and she knows that, like, Chaol put them there, and that, like, they're none of the sizes of anybody in her group. So, like, it's a red herring, but, like, it's gonna work.
Yeah.
And Herding tells her that the locks were broken from the outside, and she like, as much as she's acting here, she does feel super uncomfortable about all this blood and all, like, him dying and stuff. So, she asks anyone about, like, if they heard anything, but they just say, like, it was raining too hard. And Herding says, like, they know she was on the roof when he died, so, like, they know it wasn't her. And she's like, okay, then why are you being such assholes? But that is, we kind of get that's why she stayed on the roof all night, because she wanted them to see that it wasn't her that killed him. So, Aelin goes downstairs, and she tells Lysandra that she and Clarice can leave now, because it clearly wasn't her, but Clarice basically says she wants to stay until the reading of the will, because Arobynn told her that there'd be something for her in it. Aelin actually says that, like, it probably is more likely that the three other assassins would have more to gain from Arobynn dying. And then the master of the bank shows up, and he goes on and on about his condolences, and he kind of looks to Aelin in, like, recognition, and we're like, yes, she went to the bank 1,000 times. But Aelin is standing by Rowan, and he, like, goes to try to touch her, but she moves away. And she's not having any of his shit right now because she can't deal with it. But
but also that goes against the persona of Selena. So, like, he's not getting out of her way. Like, at the beginning, she was like, just stay out of my way. And now he's, like, trying to be all comforting. And she's like,
this is not the time. Like, I can't afford to care about you right now, basically. The master of the bank starts to list all of Arobynn's assets, and there are many. And then he says the sole beneficiary of his will is Selena Sardathian. And yeah, woo! I love it. And everybody is shocked, especially Clarice and Aelin. And Aelin's just like, obviously she's Selena in this moment, but Aelin's just like, what? What do you mean? But he says it's confirmed, like, they checked the 3 copies, and they verified all the copies of the will, and they were done 3 months ago and signed 3 months ago while she was in Wendelin. So that's interesting. And then he confirms everything is hers except for Arobin put something in about, like, paying off his debts to Clarice. And that's all that was in it. Yeah.
He must have a tab.
Even though Clarice was under the impression that she was going to get something more. Aelin tells Lysandra and Clarice to get their whoring carcasses off her property, and then, like, counts down from 5 or something, and you're like, Jesus. And then she tells the 3 assassins that they held Sam back while Arobin beat her, and she doesn't know what part they had to play in Sam's death, but that they need to get the hell out of this house. So, yeah. You're like, this is a very elaborate plan to fuck over everybody, and I am here for it. Yeah. She also tells them, like, since they haven't paid off their debts to Arobin, she actually owns them now, too, which is wild. Yeah.
Hilarious. So she's the new queen of the assassins.
But then she does say that she could sell them the guild, and they call her a bitch, and of course they do. So she asks the master of the bank to value the estate, the guild, everything. And he gives her a monetary value. And she says she will sell it to them at face value if they can get the money together. And Tern is kind of being a dick because he is a dick. But Harding says, like, they could all get together and buy it for them, like, buy it for themselves. And she says...
And be a democracy.
Not have the king of the assassins. Not be owned. So, like, it's kind of good for them, too.
Yeah. Just be a guild. Yeah, like, it's not bad. She's offered them a good deal.
It's just funny. But she just says money is money. And she asks the master to draw up the papers. And he says it'll take about 3 hours. So she congratulates them on their freedom, and then she kicks them out for the next 3 hours that she is the mistress of this house. And she tells them to take everyone who lives here with them. So, like, everybody just files out of the house. So,
I love it.
And when the house is empty, Aelin walks down to see Arobin. We go over to Rowan's point of view now, and he's kind of, like, shocked and surprised by how she's acting. And, like, he hates that he can't reach her when she's acting like this. And he hates that he panicked and shut her out last night. And, like, the person she is today and the person she is as Selena Sardothian has no kindness or joy in her. And that makes him sad. So it's not like, like, when Kale saw her like this, he hated it because she wasn't the perfect girl he thought that she was. And, like, I feel like when Rowan sees her like this, it's different, and he's, like, just sad because of what she doesn't have in her life. So I liked the juxtaposition, even though it was in a completely different book. He has to tell himself it's an act, but he does think back to, like, she did avoid his touch, and you're like, of course she did, you rejected her, like, it's not really anything to do with this. Aelin goes over to Arobin then, and she looks over at them, and she asks Aedion, and Aedion asks her then if she switched the will, and she just responds, like, you said we needed money for an army. So she did all this for the army that she needs, and, like, she's just amazing.
Hilarious.
She then tells them, like, she was the one that told the owner of the pits to feel out Arobin so that he'd regain all of the money that she lost him before he died. So, like, she really thought all of this through. And every time she went to the bank, she did, like, was figuring out the layout, was figuring out where things were kept, and, like, she redid the will and burnt the old ones.
So, like, when she was leaving in the middle of the night, she was sneaking into the bank to replace the wills.
She tells them then that Clarice would have been very rich, and Tern would be the king of the assassins. And all she would have gotten was the amulet that was already hers. So, he's a piece of shit. But it's all just wild.
I wish, though, that she had put in a stipend for Lysandra.
Yeah, but I think that would have been too obvious.
Maybe, but, like, I wish that
Lysandra
definitely
could be free. Yeah. But, like, we'll see what happens. Rowan is obviously super impressed, but she kind of keeps dismissing him. And Aelin asks why she didn't tell him. Again, it's like a broken record, but it's going to continue to be.
Yes.
But she says, like, his genuine reaction was better than if he had known. And, like, even Lysandra didn't know about this. So, like, she wanted everyone's reaction to be as authentic as it could be. She doesn't trust that anyone else can act like she can. Rowan wants to, like, be near her, but doesn't want to be pushed away again, especially in front of Aelin. She's like, this whole time in Rowan's head is just him being like, I just want to touch her. I just want to be close to her. I just want to... And you're like, we're trying to get some good information here.
It's like, this was a huge, like, a huge plot in the entire book. Like, this was like our moment of, like, her plans coming together and, like, all of this pre-planning, even from, like, week 1, working up into this amazing plan that she's been working on so hard. And Rowan's just like, touch me. Let me touch you. Don't push me
even
away.
though I pushed you away last night. Anyway. Then Aelin pulls the sheet away from Arobyn's face. And
Body.
she asks Aelin for his sword. And then she severs his head and says, just to be sure. Which I love. But I'm also like, wouldn't someone notice that she did? Like, I guess no one cares that she chopped off his head? It doesn't matter, I guess. But I don't know. I was just like, wouldn't somebody be like, why did you do that?
Why are you doing that?
Afterwards. But maybe they just don't care. I don't know. Anyway, I love it. I love that she did it. Because, like...
Yes.
It also shows a tiny bit, too, how much of a demon he was, even though he wasn't Valg. Like, he's human, fully human, but she's like, just in case, you never know. He's so evil. And yeah, that's where we end this week, which I also love. Very poetic.
Very, And it's like, it's a nice clue up, too. Even though we still have, like, 2 weeks left to go. Like, we still have a lot of book left. But it's a nice place to end, like, for right now. Now she just has to free magic and kill Dorian and then go to Terrasen.
Maybe do something about the king.
Yeah, and maybe deal with Lorcan,
That's
too.
the thing.
And try and maybe help Lysandra while you're at it.
She's been good to you. Maybe you should help her out.
But that's all. So I guess we're going to wrap it up for this week. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, please reach out to us by email at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com, or on Instagram or Facebook at coffeeandcoread, and coffee.coread on TikTok.
So next week, we're going to be reading chapters 48 to 64 of Queen of Shadows, so make sure to follow along, and if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you get our content. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next page.